Hi everyone. Again, this is Evan, and this is the Average Life of an Engineer YouTube series. Basically, what I want to go over in this episode is just a basic background on myself. That way, in future videos, if you have any questions or understand any references that I made, you'll know exactly where it's coming from. I'll try not to go into too much detail, but just enough to give you a background understanding of where I come from, why I picked engineering, and how it's affected my life thus far. So, first off, I was born in Lexington, Kentucky in 1994. I'm 23 years old. I didn't grow up very much in Kentucky. Most of my childhood, we moved twice. Eventually in 2000, my family moved to Greenville, North Carolina. That's where I spent about 16 years of my life. So basically my childhood and my rest of my teenage years were spent there. Growing up there, it's just a basic average town. It's not much. The main things that there are the school that I ended up going to, East Carolina University. So that's the main appeal of that town. It's basically a smaller university town. That being said, elementary school, high school, all went through all that fine, had a close group of friends. The thing about in high school that I just want to talk about is how I got interested in engineering. One of the classes that I decided to take my junior year was auto tech. Now, the reason I wanted to take this is because, number one, it's a trade type of skill. It's not necessarily like, you got U.S. history, you got geometry, you got algebra, you got calculus. I mean, yes, those are very fundamentally important to understand in later applications in life, but a class like auto tech is really important to almost anybody, and it can be used in basically direct application. They teach you how to replace brakes, they teach you how to change oil, they teach you how to replace tires, they teach you a lot of things. Maybe not, they don't go into exact details about every single car, but they give you, we actually worked on the cars. We actually took apart some of the components of a car and then reassembled them, and actually ended up doing some maintenance for the school teachers. So if you worked there, I maintenanced your vehicle. No negative connotations there. Anyway, so really when I was in those classes, I took it for 2 years. I really enjoyed understanding how things went together, the science behind why disc brakes are much more easy to work on than drum brakes. A lot of other things that kind of interest me that really separates a technician from an engineer, and this is something that's been kind of reinforced throughout all my education, almost all my life. The difference between a technician and an engineer. So a technician is a person that can or cannot be, not necessarily true, doesn't have to be intelligent. Basically, they know how to follow formulas. They know how to follow instructions. Now, that's not, talking down to technicians. Technicians are a very keystone career that helped this country run it very efficiently. That being said, a technician works the formulas that he's being told to do, knows how to handle certain situations when they come about that aren't necessarily spelled out, but that only comes from experience. Now, an engineer, on the other hand, ends up creating those formulas and developing those procedures that a technician can follow. Now, certainly a technician can become an engineer, but an engineer is the one that lays down the building blocks to become that. So when I realized that when I was going through auto tech, I realized, being a technician is cool. If I went down this path, I would have some certain skills that would, enable me to do things under direct application, but an engineer would be able to explain those concepts as to why they happen, would be able to, hopefully implement better designs or better instructions to make things run more efficiently in order to make maybe even the technician's job easier. So once I came to that realization, I realized, okay, let's do this. Right after I graduate high school, I'm going to go to school to be an engineer. The first semester of my senior year of high school, I applied to a community college, Pitt Community College. That's just a local community college Campbell University, and then East Carolina University. And luckily, they had an engineering program. I had no idea about that. So I got accepted into ECU, and I started engineering school. Why ECU? Well, it was close, Not to say I wouldn't have been on board to go to a different place, kind of experience a different type of lifestyle, but, I didn't really want to leave my friends. A lot of my friends weren't, going off to undergrad to a different state or anything like that, so maybe, subconsciously I just wanted to be closer to my friends. It definitely wasn't an active decision to just remain in Greenville, North Carolina, but that's just the way it worked out. Do I wish I would have changed that looking back? Maybe, but in the end, I'm glad I stick to ECU. I met a lot of good people at ECU. I was able to stick close with my family who supported me through school. I didn't have to pay for, boarding, which would have been majorly expensive. Also, I got to keep my part-time job, which I was happy about that, but I'll get into that later on. So, engineering school. Now, from what I understand, and these are just what some professors told me at ECU, maybe the first 2 semesters you're there, they enroll you in classes. Now I'm talking about the engineering core classes. They enroll you in classes that basically is like a fishing pole, and then they're baiting you in. Basically, they give you, and this is how one of my professors, I'm not going to say who, coined it, they give you the fun classes. These are the classes that are going to be like engineering graphics, engineering design, very vague ideas of how an engineering works. Basically, they say, have fun, creatively solve this problem, draw these little squares, and then that's a drawing. We all wish that's all it could have been, but no. So that was the first 2 semesters of engineering school. After the second semester, boom, they hit you with Calculus 2. They hit you with statics and dynamics. They hit you with physics. They bombard you with the fundamental concepts that you have to know in order to go on the engineering curriculum. Now, basically, once those harder classes, not necessarily harder classes, but once the fundamental classes started, that's how they weed out the people that aren't that committed. Granted, it was a big shock to me. I really wasn't expecting it to be that difficult, but in the end, I wish I hadn't underestimated it, because one of the classes, statics and dynamics, and for those of you who have not taken engineering school, it's a very, very important class to master and understand. I really kind of swept that class under the rug. I just considered it, just another class that I had to take. I didn't really put as much effort as I wanted to into that class in order to, understand the concepts. Even though me being a mechanical engineer, statics and dynamics is probably one of the most important things you could understand moving forward. But I slacked off. I barely did homework. I didn't study very much for tests at all. So I ended up making a D in the class. And unfortunately, that was a C-wall class. So you had to make a C. I made a D, so I had to retake that class. Now, retaking a class is not fun. You're learning the same stuff twice. But when I went through it the first time, I basically didn't learn anything. I learned a few things. I learned probably the very minimum you could learn from that class, but taking it again was super helpful. I understood everything full through. It helped me root deep into what I need to do to succeed as an engineer. And so once I took it again, I aced it. I got an A in that class, and moving forward, I just told myself, look, you don't have time to mess around, You can't just treat these like this is just going to be like going through English or social studies in high school. This is your career. These are the classes that are going to help you understand how you do your job. And if you don't understand them, you're not going to make it in a career. Now, that's one of the important things, not even about engineering. That's just life in general. If you don't apply yourself to the major that you're following, and granted, if it's the major you're going to follow through with, you're not going to have a very successful career. Now, there is the mentality, and it is very in fact true, that a lot of the stuff you learn in college you don't use. While that might be true on an elementary level, It's not true on a work ethical level. When you apply the amount of workload you do into, the job that you're eventually going to have, it'll reflect. And if you didn't try very hard in school, if you had someone you could get the answers from, or you had someone that had a test bank or something like that, it's going to show at work. Your boss isn't going to like it because he's going to realize, who is this guy, or the person that's interviewing. They're going to be like, did he even really try? Why is he interviewing for this job? He didn't really meet the requirements that, the degree he has required of him. So that's one of the most important things I learned, retaking statics, is that, I got to do this. I got to apply myself. I got to increase my work ethic. So that's the approach I took for the rest of my college career. And yes, I didn't necessarily get, perfect A's throughout college, but eventually I passed and I've graduated. Now, I don't want to make it sound like, this was just, it was easy. Once I just got past that, went over the hill of statics and dynamics, it was just downhill from there. No. Circuits was really hard for me. Fluid mechanics was very hard for me. So there were a lot of classes that really, even though they were very important, they were still hard, but eventually, in the end, I understood the concepts. And if I didn't, then I reviewed them on my own terms. And I do that to this day. I've had this job. I've been a mechanical engineer for a year at the company I work for, and I still go over the basics. I still go over Arrhenius' equation. I still go over heat transfer equations because I have to, because no one remembers all that stuff. Engineering like I said, engineering is not memorizing formulas. It's understanding the concepts of how things work on a fundamental level, and then applying yourself to help understand how the whole system works and how you can explain how a certain system works in the steps of formulas and procedures for certain technicians and maybe people underneath them to follow. And once you establish those procedures, you can improve upon them. One of the most important things an engineer can ask himself is, how can I make this better? How can I improve this? What can I do to make this run more smoothly? I always ask that of myself when I'm at my job, in order to help create a process make it more effective. So basically, when I had that mentality in school, that just drove me to succeed. And succeed, I did. I consider myself successful at school. Even though I didn't have, cum laude at the end of my degree, I felt like I achieved something. And I felt like I did, because after that, after I applied to all the jobs that I applied to, and I'll get into that, people, it was really, really good to hear that people were impressed with the amount of work I'd put into studying. It's it's a rewarding thing to hear that. And you might take it for granted, pat yourself on the back, everyone says that, but I mean, after the workload that you put in after engineering school, when an employer is saying how good you've done, it feels really, really good. Very intrinsically good. So that's another, one of the reasons I went through engineering school and really tried my best. So this ends part 1 of my background of my life. Unfortunately, under the given circumstances of my recording equipment, I can only do up to 15-minute videos for YouTube, but part 2 is coming very, very soon. Thanks for watching my video, and if you do like my video, subscribe and I will post more. Thank you. Evan out.